The Haunting of Hollow Creek * in the small, secluded town of Hollow Creek, there stood an old mansion that was whispered about in hushed tones. It had been abandoned for decades, its once grand facade now covered in ivy and decay. The townspeople avoided it, believing it to be cursed, for everyone who had ever spent a night within its walls had never been the same again. One chilly October night, a group of friends, Sarah, Mark, Jenny, and Tom, decided to test their courage and spend the night in the mansion. They were thrill seekers, always looking for the next big adventure, and the legends of the mansion intrigued them. Armed with flashlights, sleeping bags, and a sense of bravado, they made their way to the eerie old house. As they stepped inside, the wooden floorboards creaked beneath their feet. The air was thick with dust, and an unnatural chill seemed to seep into their bones. They set up camp in what must have once been the grand living room, the remains of an ornate chandelier dangling precariously from the ceiling. They laughed and told stories to pass the time, trying to ignore the oppressive silence that surrounded them. As midnight approached, they decided to explore the mansion, each taking a different direction to cover more ground. They promised to return to the living room in an hour. Sarah wandered into the library, where ancient books lined the walls. As she ran her fingers along the spines, she felt a sudden draft and turned to see a book lying open on the floor. The pages were yellowed and brittle, and as she picked it up, she saw that it was filled with handwritten notes, pleas for help and warnings to leave the house. Her heart raced as she read the final, hastily scrawled entry. "It knows you're here." Meanwhile, Mark climbed the creaking stairs to the second floor. The hallway was lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow him as he moved. He reached a bedroom at the end of the hall and pushed open the door. The room was untouched by time, as if someone had left it in a hurry and never returned. On the dresser, a music box began to play a haunting melody. Though Mark hadn't touched it, he felt a cold hand on his shoulder and spun around, but there was no one there. Jenny and Tom explored the basement together, the smell of damp earth and decay filling their nostrils. They found an old wine cellar, the bottles covered in thick layers of dust. As they ventured further, they came across a hidden door, partially concealed by cobwebs. Curiosity getting the better of them, they forced it open and found a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. With only the beam of their flashlight to guide them, they descended into what appeared to be an old torture chamber. Rusted chains hung from the walls, and a chilling sense of malevolence permeated the air. They heard faint whispers, and shadows seemed to move at the edges of their vision. Panic set in, and they hurried back upstairs. The friends reconvened in the living room, their faces pale and their nerves frayed. They shared their experiences, each story more unsettling than the last. They decided they had tempted fate long enough and prepared to leave. But as they gathered their things, the front door slammed shut on its own, and the temperature in the room plummeted. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the house, whispering their names. The walls seemed to close in, and a shadowy figure appeared in the doorway, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. Paralyzed with fear, the friends watched as it floated closer, its form becoming more defined, a woman in tattered, blood-stained clothing, her face twisted in a scream of eternal agony. "Leave this place," she hissed, her voice filled with rage and sorrow. "You do not belong here." The friends bolted for the door, but it wouldn't budge. The figure's eyes burned brighter, and the room began to shake. Just when they thought all hope was lost, Sarah remembered the book she had found. She pulled it from her bag and frantically flipped to the last page. "Speak these words," she read aloud, her voice trembling. "By the power of the forgotten, we seek passage from this realm." The figure shrieked, a sound that pierced their ears and made their blood run cold. The shaking intensified, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The front door creaked open, and the figure vanished. The friends didn't hesitate. They fled the mansion and didn't stop running until they reached the safety of the town. They never spoke of that night again, but the terror they experienced remained etched in their minds forever. The mansion still stands in Hollow Creek, waiting for the next group of curious souls to dare its haunted halls, and the legend lives on, a chilling reminder of the things that lurk in the shadows, just beyond the veil of our understanding. In a small, secluded village surrounded by dense, ancient woods, there was a house that no one dared to approach. It stood at the edge of the forest, its once bright paint now peeling, and its windows dark and empty. Locals whispered that the house was cursed, that anyone who entered never came out the same. For years, it remained abandoned, a blot of darkness against the vibrant green of the woods. One summer evening, a group of 4 friends, Emma, Jack, Lucy, and Ben, decided to explore the house. They were in their late teens, and the thrill of doing something forbidden was too tempting to resist. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they made their way to the decrepit house as the sun set, casting long shadows that seemed to reach out like skeletal fingers. The front door creaked open with an eerie wail, and the friends stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Their flashlights revealed cobweb-covered furniture and walls adorned with faded, peeling wallpaper. The atmosphere was suffocating, heavy with a palpable sense of dread. As they ventured deeper into the house, they found a staircase leading to the basement. Ben, always the fearless leader, insisted they check it out. Hesitantly, the others followed. The basement was pitch black, the feeble beams of their flashlights barely cutting through the darkness. The temperature dropped noticeably as they descended, and an inexplicable sense of being watched settled over them. In the far corner of the basement, they found an old, wooden chest. It was intricately carved with symbols they couldn't recognize, and it emanated a strange, cold energy. Ignoring Lucy's protests, Jack pried it open. Inside, they found a collection of yellowed, ancient-looking manuscripts and a small, ornate mirror. As Emma picked up the mirror, she felt an odd compulsion to look into it. The glass was cloudy, but she could just make out her reflection. As she stared, her reflection began to distort, the features twisting into a grotesque, nightmarish version of herself. She screamed and dropped the mirror, which shattered into 1,000 pieces on the concrete floor. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted further, and a chilling wind swept through the basement. The manuscripts fluttered, and the friends heard whispering faint, malevolent voices speaking in a language none of them understood. Shadows began to move independently of the light, swirling around them like living entities. Panic set in. They tried to run, but the basement door slammed shut with a thunderous bang. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, and the shadows closed in. Ben pounded on the door, but it wouldn't budge. The friends huddled together, terror-stricken. In the midst of their panic, the shadows coalesced into a figure tall, indistinct shape with hollow eyes that seemed to suck in all light. It reached out with elongated fingers, and as it touched each of them, they felt an icy chill seep into their bones, sapping their strength and will. Just when it seemed all hope was lost, Emma remembered the manuscripts. With trembling hands, she fumbled through the pages, hoping to find something, anything, that could save them. One page stood out, covered in the same symbols that adorned the chest. Desperately, she began to read aloud the strange, ancient words. The shadows recoiled, writhing in apparent agony. The figure's form began to dissolve, its hollow eyes burning with a fierce, unnatural light. The whispers turned into a cacophony of anguished screams. With a final, shuddering breath, Emma shouted the last word of the incantation. The shadows exploded in a burst of blinding light, and the friends found themselves back at the top of the stairs, the basement door wide open. They didn't hesitate, they fled the house, not stopping until they were far away from its sinister presence. The village elders later revealed that the house had belonged to a reclusive scholar who dabbled in forbidden magic. He had tried to summon and control dark entities, but instead, he became their victim. The house was cursed, forever haunted by the entities he unleashed. The friends never spoke of their experience again, but each bore the mark of that night. They were never quite the same, always haunted by the memory of the shadows and the hollow-eyed figure. And the house at the edge of the forest remained, its dark windows silently watching, waiting for the next unwary souls to cross its threshold. The echoing whispers of Blackwood Manor. On the outskirts of the sleepy town of Ravensbrook lay the abandoned Blackwood Manor, a sprawling Victorian mansion shrouded in local legends and ghostly whispers. For decades, it had stood as a silent sentinel, its once grand facade now crumbling under the weight of time and neglect. No one in Ravensbrook dared to venture near it, especially after dark. They spoke in hushed tones of eerie lights flickering in the windows and disembodied voices calling out from the shadows. Nathaniel Grayson was a rational man, a professor of history at the local university. He prided himself on his skepticism and his ability to debunk myths and superstitions. When he inherited Blackwood Manor from a distant relative, he saw it not as a curse, but as an opportunity, a chance to explore and document a piece of forgotten history. On a cold, misty morning, Nathaniel arrived at Blackwood Manor. The iron gates groaned in protest as he pushed them open, and the gravel path crunched beneath his feet. The mansion loomed ahead, its windows like empty eyes, watching his every move. He felt a chill, but he brushed it off as the weather. After all, he was a man of reason, not one to be swayed by ghost stories. Inside, the manor was a labyrinth of dark, dusty corridors and rooms filled with cobwebs and decaying furniture. Nathaniel set up his camp in the Grand Library, a cavernous room lined with shelves of ancient books. He lit a fire in the hearth, its warmth a stark contrast to the cold, damp air that permeated the rest of the house. As he began his exploration, he found himself drawn to the manor's history. He discovered journals and letters detailing the lives of the Blackwood family, an affluent but troubled lineage plagued by tragedy and madness. The patriarch, Sir Edmund Blackwood, had been a renowned occultist, obsessed with uncovering the secrets of life and death. His experiments and rituals were whispered to have opened a gateway to the other side, unleashing something malevolent into the world. Nathaniel's nights were plagued by unsettling dreams. He saw shadowy figures moving through the halls, heard distant whispers echoing through the walls, and felt an oppressive presence watching him. Each morning, he awoke with a sense of unease that grew stronger with each passing day. One night, as he pored over Sir Edmund's journal, Nathaniel discovered a hidden passage behind a bookcase. It led down a narrow, winding staircase into the depths of the manor, Driven by curiosity, he descended into the darkness, his lantern casting flickering shadows on the damp stone walls. At the bottom, he found a hidden chamber, its walls covered in arcane symbols and eerie paintings depicting twisted, nightmarish landscapes. In the center of the room stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface dark and foreboding. Nathaniel felt an inexplicable pull towards the mirror, as if it were calling to him. As he approached, the mirror's surface began to ripple and shift. He saw fleeting images of the Blackwood family, Sir Edmund performing dark rituals, his wife sobbing in despair, their children hiding in terror. Then, the mirror showed Nathaniel himself, standing in the chamber, his expression one of horror. Suddenly, the room grew cold, and the whispers Nathaniel had heard in his dreams grew louder, more insistent. He tried to look away, but his reflection held him captive. The whispers turned into voices, a cacophony of anguish and fear. Nathaniel realized late that the mirror was a portal, a conduit for the restless spirits trapped within the manor. He felt a cold hand on his shoulder, and he spun around to find himself face to face with the spectre of Sir Edmund Blackwood. The ghost's eyes burned with an otherworldly light, and he spoke in a voice that seemed to echo from the depths of the abyss. "You have awakened us, Nathaniel Grayson," Sir Edmund intoned. "Now, you must join us." Nathaniel tried to flee, but the spirits closed in, their ghostly forms emerging from the shadows, their faces twisted in torment. The room seemed to close in on him, the air growing thick with an oppressive darkness. He felt his strength ebbing away, his mind unraveling under the weight of the supernatural onslaught. In his final moments, Nathaniel's skepticism gave way to sheer terror. The spirits engulfed him, their cold, spectral hands pulling him into the mirror's dark depths. His screams echoed through the manor, then were swallowed by silence. Blackwood Manor stood silent once more, its dark secrets and restless spirits waiting for the next unwary soul to cross its threshold. The townspeople of Ravensbrook continued to whisper about the old mansion, the eerie lights, and the echoes of screams that sometimes pierce the night. And in the grand library, a new journal lay open on the desk, its final entry written in a trembling hand. "Beware the mirror. It is a doorway to the other side, and those who gaze into its depths may never return." The legend of Blackwood Manor grew, and Nathaniel Grayson became just another ghost story, a cautionary tale of curiosity leading to doom. The manor waited, patient and eternal, for the next skeptic to challenge its haunted legacy.